This is a bonus episode of the WTF Bach podcast.
This is a bonus episode.
Aren't you so lucky? This is a bonus episode. Bonus episode of the WTF Bach podcast.
Thank you, Gabby. I am WTF Bach. Something a little different for you today on the podcast, which is the performer's commentary on my first album. Now, do you remember when, in the age of DVDs, you put on your favorite film, and instead of watching the film, you watched the director's commentary? You'd see the film, but overdubbed was the director's voice saying, "Oh yes, this scene was shot at 3 a.m. after skydiving blindfolded, blah, 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 blah." Well, I wanted the listener of my albums to have a similar experience, skydiving blindfolded. No, I wanted this to replace the program notes in the modern era. You'll be able to hear me saying, this part here, I love this part, or this part is very difficult, as I'm playing the music. You will now hear the entirety of my first of 3 recently released albums with my voice commentating over the top of it, similar to what you hear on this podcast, but with a little different feel. And of course, it should remind you all to go and listen to the 3 albums I just recently released. For if you want to hear the album without my voice, then you can hear the album on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, etc. And if you want to take this episode on the go, you can purchase the performer's commentary on Bandcamp, as well as any track from any of the recently released albums individually. Let's imagine you really like one song and one song only. I'll put the links in the episode description. And also that latest episode, which was the final episode of the 14 additional Goldberg canons, the one that plays what Bach's business card sounded like. I know that episode was highly complex, highly visual really, so I've made a video to Bach's business card that might help you understand it a little bit better, and that should come out on my YouTube channel sometime next week. So if you've not subscribed to that YouTube channel, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, are you waiting for? Meanwhile, thank you very much for your support and your donations. Mostly, I really thrive on your positive energy. I've got a lot of very kind notes from you in many different places of the world, and that makes me happy. So now please enjoy the performer's commentary to Volume 1 of the complete keyboard works by J.S. Bach. Welcome to the performer's commentary for Bach Keyboard Works Volume 1, the 5 earliest suites in a mean tone temperament. I've decided to release this album first, as these 5 pieces are some of the earliest pieces we have of the composer. Bach was most likely in his mid-teens when composing these pieces. The latest, 1707, but probably this music is before 1704 when the composer was still 19, probably, between 15, 19, even earlier maybe. Now perhaps you're wondering, why does the piano sound weird? I'm going to get into it on the next track. Let's just start off by saying that this is the prelude, the suite in B-flat major, BWV 821. Here's the Allemande. The Allemande is a nice flowing dance. In a suite, the Allemande is usually the first dance. It often follows a prelude, as it did here and will with many of the suites on this record. Now, the temperament issue. What does it mean when an instrument is tuned to mean tone? Is there one way of tuning to mean tone? No, mean tone temperament is an entire family of tunings. And tunings, it's an enormous subject that could occupy a semester of college study, if not your entire life if you're into it. Let's say, indeed, that this record, this piano, is tuned in a mean tone temperament, which is not usually how pianos are tuned. Now, am I trying to be historically accurate? Obviously not. I'm playing a piano, but I hope to be continuing in the spirit of the Baroque musician by using the available modern instruments and experimenting with the tunings, and doing so, I hope to give you, the listener, an experience you've never had before. Mean tone tuning is a much more natural way of tuning intervals based on just using our ears and not really so much theory. Now, the consequences of this we'll hear throughout the record. We'll hear extremely dissonant things and even moments where the piano will sound like a honky-tonk. Is that Bach himself in his early years pointing to the fact that he was going to have to invent new temperaments to accommodate his works? There's evidence that mean tone temperaments existed in Europe on keyboards even well into the 19th century, So if this is not exactly how Bach himself might have tuned his harpsichord, we could very well say that this is how a lot of Bach's music may have been heard well after his death, even 100 years after his death. Now I'll let you hear the second half of this Allemande without my gab. Now this is the Courant BWV 821. This entire suite was sort of dismissed from the Bach repertoire in the middle of the 20th century and has only really been authenticated, we might say, as of 2005. It was given a BWV number by Schmieder, the man who invented the BWV catalog, and then people said, it's really doubtful if it's actually Bach, until again it was officially reprinted only as late as 2005. To me, it has the true voice of the early Bach. I think we'll be familiar with this voice by the end of the record. Now, the saraband is my favorite dance to talk about because what is a suite, really? And since this record is the 5 earliest suites, what is a suite? Well, a suite is a collection of various dances from various countries. We had the Allemande, that was German, the Courant or the Corrente, French or Italian. But the saraband, that actually comes from Spain, but was brought back to Spain from the conquistadors, who took it actually from America, from the early indigenous people on the continent. Now, it was brought back to Spain, and then these conquistadors, so the legend goes, they attempted to dance the dance or show what the indigenous people were dancing like. And the court said, no, that dance is too erotic. It will be banned. And so actually the saraband was banned from courtly dancing for a time in Europe. Now, how did that dance that possibly had its origins in the Americas, how did that dance become the heart of the European dance suite? I find that one of the great wonders of European culture. One final note about temperament, and then we can hopefully listen to the rest of the record. One of the things that an unequal temperament, such as the one you're hearing, does is it tunes certain keys more pleasing to the ears than other keys. Well, which keys? Why, the ones close to the home key. So in this suite, the chords close to B-flat major. So here we can hear the young Johann straying only occasionally from those comfortable harmonies, and those moments will really highlight how distant, in fact, harmonically he strays. Here's a little petite reprise, as they say, and then we'll be on to the last movement of the suite. This movement is called Echo. I think you can tell why. Bach wrote 2 of them in his career. This one from the early years, and the one that comes at the end of the French Overture, which was a mature work that was published, engraved on copper. Now, these echoes that you can hear in the music would have been performed on 2 different keyboards. The large ensemble on the lower keyboard, and the echo on the upper keyboard. 2 sets of strings, played on the organ, 2 sets of pipes. fun that comes from studying this work is seeing that the echo is not always exactly the echo. There are little changes in the echo that Bach subtly achieves. This one, for example, ends in a completely different harmony. Here, the longest phrase we hear the tonality being stretched, the harmony, the tuning. And the penultimate phrase and its echo. Now here, Bach writes adagio, comfortable, and it's figured bass, meaning there's only numbers and the bass line written, and you have to supply the harmony and whatever else as you see fit. A great masterpiece, in my opinion, of the teenage Bach. Not very often played, and it certainly should be. Now, the next piece on the album is the Prelude and Partita, known as the Preludium del Tuono Terzo. What exactly does Tuono Terzo mean? Well, I've asked all my Italian-speaking friends, and they have no idea. My theory is that the Tuono Terzo refers to the third tone, as in Do, Re, Mi, meaning it's based on the major scale. It's a piece in the major mode. That's just my theory. In any case, this piece is lovely. It modulates, it experiences a fantasy. Where are we? Lovely moments like this. Stepping in and out of the tuning, perhaps. It comes to a lovely end and then introduces the entire suite of dances which follows next. Yes, this is a charming allemande. These repeated notes, this is really a theme with early Bach. You'll see in a lot of his early pieces, the Capriccio for the Beloved Brother, the fugue of the based on the cuckoo and the hen from the D major sonata. A lot of his early fugues have this repeated note thing here. Bum, 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 bum. I like hearing the structure of these pieces with this particular mean tone temperament because of things like this, moments like this. Did you hear that? It's sort of he opens the window to the new tuning and then closes it and says, no, we're staying here. Those of us, I think, not familiar with the early Bach might be surprised to hear that this is in fact Bach. He hadn't found his own style yet. In fact, it was told to me once that the problem with early Bach is that he hadn't found how to write for anyone other than himself. But as soon as you figure out that very unique spirit, then early Bach really becomes a marvelous, marvelous place to spend many years studying. Here we have a lovely courant in the very French style. In these early works, Bach may be sort of playing with the theme and variations idea. You'll note that the harmony here in the courant is very similar to the harmony in the previous dance, the allemande. It points to another piece, which, again, is not often played, in fact, was cast as doubtful authenticity, the Sarabande with Partita BWV 990, sort of like a dance suite within variations. We can hear that a bit here. Each dance might be similarly based harmonically. Now this beautiful piece, the Sarabande, we could call it simple, and you'll enjoy the pun because this, in fact, is the Sarabande simple, meaning it is followed by a double, by a double. What is a double? Well, a double is simply double the speed. Same harmony, but it will go twice as fast. So you will hear here this same harmony repeated, but the notes will pick up and go twice as fast. There's the end of the simple into the double. Now, one of the illustrative things about this double is that Bach himself marks it allegro, and that is not a tempo we associate with sarabands, but it is instructive to us in that sarabands were somewhat quick-moving, and allegro does not necessarily meaning fast. It does mean, ready, with cheer, happy in some translations. Now, if I had to pick a favorite piece on the album, it is this one. This is the aria, the finale of this partita, BWV 833. This is a piece of figured bass. He barely sketches the right hand part out. Most of it is written in figures, but through these figures we're able to generate this music. I won't say anything else about this piece. It's so charming. Please enjoy it. I said I won't say anything, but here is the theme. He simply writes da capo. You return to the original 8 or so bars. That's the partita. And on to the next suite. This suite does not have a prelude. It starts straight away with the allemande. This is the suite in A major, BWV 832. This is probably the most mature piece on this album. It could be from 1709, but is probably, again, before 1707 or even before 1704. There is slight more maturity, I believe, in this allemande than in the others, but we can still see some hallmarks of the early, possibly teenage composer still figuring out voice leading and other technical concepts like this. And we hear in the tuning crunchy areas like that, which is him being adventurous in his modulations. And again, did you hear those repeated notes? That is such a hallmark, like I mentioned earlier, such a hallmark of the early Bach. Here's the second half now repeated. Yes, this is not a courant. This is the air for the trumpets. The young Bach evoking the virtuosic trumpet playing from those lovely trumpet airs that you maybe know from Henry Purcell, other composers of the era. Here's the first half repeated. Bach, in his early years, seems to be a bit more of a programmatic composer. The famous piece of program music, the Capriccio on the departure of the beloved brother, as well as the D major sonata, I think I already mentioned it, that has a fugue based in imitation of the Gallino cuckoo, the sort of the cuckoo bird, the cock-a-doodle-doo call. This one, imitation of the trumpets. It's a different kind of programmatic music than the mature Bach, than the Bach of the 300 cantatas in Leipzig. In this part here, of course, we'll seldomly see that kind of writing, just octaves back and forth. It's almost like Beethoven or something. Here's the second half again. And the flat 7, that is G major there. An interesting choice. You hear the trumpet playing virtuosically, and now the octaves again. Try and find that in any other portion of the keyboard repertoire. Air for the trumpets. There it is. And now we have a saraband. One of my personal favorite sarabands because these chords. I won't talk over them the second time, but these chords are very, very rare. I think it speaks to the early temperaments that Bach was using. They would have sounded quite different from equal temperament, as you can hear here. Listen. This one. And in the second half of the saraband, it will step from A major into F major, and that will sound quite extreme. Even this. And here's the step into F. I find these temperaments tend to become a bit addictive. You can't quite go back to equal temperament because all the personality is lost. I mean, the journey from here to there is extreme, and the tension is so great that it must be resolved much more convincingly than an equal temperament. All right, let's go on. This is the bourrée from the suite, BWV 832 in A major. The bourrée, I believe, is a country dance, definitely involved with making wine. You can hear the feet, maybe even stomping up the grapes. They're almost always, I might even say always, very lively dances. And they come between the saraband and the jig, or the saraband and the final dance, whatever it may be. Now the jig. Of course, this is Pop Goes the Weasel. This is the Celtic dance in a form of three. Really bringing the European dance to a drunken and lively conclusion. And here's the end. Now, this is a problematic work, or always has been a problematic work for us Bach enthusiasts. This is the overture in G minor, BWV 822. Why is it problematic? Well, it has always been doubted, its authenticity. Often has been thought of as a transcription of other composers' work. But now the modern scholarship says there's no reason to doubt that this is in fact the early attempt of the French overture style by the young teenage Bach. Now, what is French overture? It is festive music. The opening parts, such as this part, evoking the entire orchestra, often with timpani, drums, dotted rhythms, march-like textures, these dotted rhythms here. Big scales, flourishing scales. Some more flourishing scales. And after this big music with the entire ensemble, it will break off into a smaller fugal section and smaller groups of instruments such as this right here. We can hear Bach playing with all the different parts of the orchestra. Maybe flutes, maybe violas, maybe lower instruments. But the really outstanding feature of this movement here is the modulation from G minor into G flat major. I really want to get that into your ears. It's unmistakable, actually. This one, moving from G minor very slowly to G flat major. And he slowly comes out of it. But I see this as unavoidable in practically any temperament, such a dramatic move from G minor into G flat major, and to me it just says this is young Bach being rebellious, young Bach looking for a solution to temperament. How would he solve this? It would take him some 20 years before he hits upon the well-tempered clavier, but we can see him there, either provoking or maybe pointing out shortcomings of other tuning systems. Maybe in fact he really enjoyed the dissonance. In any case, we're back to the festive music in cut time. Whole orchestra now. There is, at the end of this movement, a repeat sign. You'd go back and repeat the entire fugue again. I believe I have declined to do that on this recording. Yes, it looks like it. Now, interesting, this suite will not contain any of the normal features or the usual features of the suite, an allemande, a courante, or a sarabande. Instead, after the first movement here, the first prelude overture that we heard, we have this aria. What was an aria for Bach? It might make an interesting study. The fact that the final movement of the F major partita earlier on this album was also an aria. The fact that the first opening sarabande on which the Goldberg Variations is based is called an aria. Bach was an educated man. He would have known that aria meant air, as in a tune you could even whistle. Some of the origins of the musical genre mean that. Could you whistle this tune up top? In any case, this movement, though it seems possibly inscrutable at first in its evasive qualities, has really grown on me as being one of the superbly expressive pieces of early Bach. And there's even a fermata here. I think the second time through I'll maybe do some improvising in it. Or maybe I don't repeat it at all, I don't. No, here's the repeat. Yes, that's a little cadential flourish there on the fermata. But certainly a piece worth entering the repertoire of those who don't know this very expressive piece. This is probably the most famous piece on the album. Somehow this piece has entered the repertoire of amateur pianists and child musicians. It's a rondo on a gavotte, meaning A, B, A, C, A, D, A. Here's the A form again. Does this rondo only have two alternate sections? Here's the C section. And back to the A section. This is the bourrée from the G minor overture suite partita, beat of the 822. Again, the bourrée, this lively, possibly country drinking dance, wine-making dance. Here's the repeat of the second half. Now, this is the minuet. There's a lot of minuetting here, actually. There are 3 different minuets. They will always come in alternation, and it will always come back to this one, which is minuet 1. In fact, minuet 2 will simply be an inversion of minuet 1, where the right and the left hand switch roles. Minuet 3 will be the only major music we hear in this suite, as it's in G major. There's minuet 2. You can hear that the right and left hand have swapped places. It's known as convertible counterpoint. And we're going back to minuet 1 here. From the ornaments there, I'm trying to change up every time I play minuet 1 because I believe it'll be played over 3 times with repeats. How many times then? 6 times? Here's minuet 3. G major now. Listen to the difference that the temperament makes between minor and major. That moment there when it modulated to the dominant, it really makes you feel the origin of the word, the dominant. I've never understood why the dominant chord is called the dominant, other than the fact that it tends to dominate with its tension. It makes the resolution very convincing. And now, out of major, back into the minuet 1. Here we are on another jig. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, pop, pop, pop. The lively dance, typically at the end of all of Bach's suites, with a few notable exceptions. In fact, the first 2 suites on this record had echoes and arias to the end. This moment here, one of my favorites. This inner voice here. And headed back to the second half. Now here we are in F major again, the final piece on the record, the overture, again another overture, this time in F major, BWV 820. Again, all the same things apply, though this opening section here tends to be a bit more sparse than the previous overture in G minor. It still evokes that festive, dotted rhythm music. And after this repeat here, it will break off into a lovely fugue, but we are going back to the top with this chord. And here is the fugue. More voices from top to bottom entering. Experimenting with the minor mode here. Very charming music. And the final phrase will end very abruptly. Now this charming piece is called entree, as in the entrance of all of the characters onto the stage in the ballet. Now, this is the only entree Bach ever wrote. Again, it shows the young composer not sure what kind of composer he was going to be. Could he have been a ballet composer? Could he have been a secular opera composer? You know, he had to know and learn all the styles. Again, flirting with the windows into different tonalities there. We'll hear that again. And these exciting scales. Now he'll stay in major, and then just go into minor, and come right back out. Here is the minuet, followed by a trio, and then the minuet again. Second half of the minuet. Now the trio has a very different texture. You can hear a bassoon playing along the left hand. And this, you can hear him fiddling with the temperament. And back to the minuet. I will fade out here. And the bourrée, the unmistakable drunken dance that precedes the jig. I hope you've gotten a bit used to this early Bach. The following track will be the jig, and I don't think I'll have time to speak about the music, as I should use that time doing the album credits. But it is a very exciting jig, and hopefully an exciting conclusion to this record. The jig, the finale of the record, Jig BWV 820. The record was engineered and mixed by Aaron Ross in New York City on March 23rd and 24th, 2023. The technician was Shane Hoshino. Special thanks to him for preparing these adventurous temperaments, which are based on syntonic commas, quarter comma temperaments, based on Aaron or Aaron, A-R-O-N, mean tone temperaments. And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening.